Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining promptly. And welcome to the very first Moray Climate Assembly. It's a fair COP. I just want to check everybody can hear me all right. A few thumbs up would be great. Perfect, thank you very much. So this event is being hosted by tsiMORAY to stimulate meaningful action on climate change in Moray leading up to COP26 and beyond. I'm Edward Fitzel, and I work for tsiMORAY, which is an organisation that supports the growth and development of the third sector in Moray, Scotland. It's part of the wider third sector interface network, which spans across Scotland, consisting of 32 similar organisations that serve the country's third sector as a whole. So before I go on, just a few housekeeping things. This event is being recorded, and the way Zoom works is that only the speaker actually is being recorded. So if you remain on mute, you won't come into the recording. On that note, please do remain on mute at all times just to prevent background noise. And at times you may be invited to speak, so then please do unmute yourself. Please use the chat function to say hello, say where you're from. We've got lots of people from Moray, and we've got also people from around the world. So just say hello, say who you are, say what you're up to, use the chat to connect with each other. We're going to save the chat and discuss that after the meeting. We've also got a Twitter hashtag, which is hashtag Moray Climate Assembly, or one word. Please use that during the event or after the event to stay in touch and let people know what's going on. I wanted to start just by saying a little bit about why we've established the Climate Assembly now. So to me, it really seems like some major events are coming together. And this makes it more likely for meaningful action to occur on climate change, both globally and locally. So internationally, we're seeing the USA rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement. At the national level in Scotland, we've got a target to achieve net zero by 2045. And locally, we've got a plethora of cross-sector activity aimed at tackling climate change. And of course, Scotland is hosting COP26, the United Nations Conference of the Parties, in Glasgow this November. But perhaps most importantly, we've been hearing from our members about the need for an environmental forum. And in particular, the Moray Social Enterprise Network has been asking for setting up of an environmental forum. So that's why we're setting it up today. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Martin Valenti. Martin is head of climate enterprise at Scottish Enterprise and is known as a serial disruptor, award-winning sustainability practitioner, and a well-regarded speaker on the subject of climate change. So in preparation for this session, I actually spoke to Martin last week, and he mentioned he'd had a variety of invitations for other events, and I think he was actually even on the ticket to speak at several other events happening at the same time as this one. And I'm absolutely delighted that he chose to be with us today. And I think it was out of some level of curiosity as to what appetite there is for action on climate change in Moray. There will be question and answer session after Martin has spoken. So please do use the chat function to ask questions and try and keep them as concise as possible to help me group them together. So at that point, I will hand over to Martin, who's disappeared from my screen, but I'm sure he's there.
Am I back on your screen, Edward?
Yes, I can see you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the
Martin.
Yeah.
Virtual hand claps, I think.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am absolutely delighted to be here with you on what sounds like a really exciting adventure you're just about to embark on. And climate change is an adventure, and I really want to make that point today about it is very challenging, but it's also very exciting, because you and I are working at a time when our actions, our decisions will make a lasting impact for the planet. And that might sound melodramatic, but it's supposed to, because it is melodramatic. We literally are the last bastions of hope for civilization on the planet. In fact, former President Obama famously said this, that we're the first generation to see and witness the impacts from climate change, and we're the last generation that's going to be able to do something about it. So no pressure us then. So we really have this massive challenge on our hands. And I'm not here to give a presentation. I don't do that. I'm here to give a proposition. And my proposition is predicated on part facts of what we've achieved in the past, part facts about what 2045 for Scotland to 2030 for Moray could look like. And quite a lot of it, those facts are nestled within a mindset. And I'll say mindset quite a few times today, and whoever finds me saying mindset the first 10 times wins a prize. But mindset is critical, because it's that takes you to where we need to go, not fear. You know, fear paralyzes people, hope mobilizes people. So we need to come together in this army of climate change solutioneers, trying to figure out what the outcomes are that we want to see in Moray, how that transpires across Scotland, and how the world views Scotland. And on that point about how the world views Scotland, let me just explain. I've got a countdown clock here, which I've got on my proper computer. Incidentally, I'm using my wife's laptop today. And if you hear some gurgly crackle, it's not the microphone, it's just me talking rubbish. But I'll try my best to keep a focus. 269 days, 13 hours, 45 minutes, and 3 seconds. The world will be in Glasgow. And what will they see? Will they see a nation that is in a climate emergency? And when you look at that, the climate emergency, if you had to define that, that means we're kind of out of control. There's something wrong. As Greta Thunberg would say, your house is on fire. So at this present moment, status for the United Kingdom, status for Scotland, status for Moray is emergency. Now let me ask you a question that you can maybe think about running through your mind. Do investors run towards an emergency? Does the major investment that we need to solve some of our societal issues, to create a net zero economy, and I'll speak about that later, do they follow problems to solve? Or do they look to explore and exploit opportunities? So that's just a kind of a question I want to leave hanging in the air, because if we only present problems to fix, the whole lens of sustainability becomes a compliance issue. Now you might say, well, compliance is really important. Of course it's important, but compliance stops bad things happening. It doesn't necessarily support better things to happen and good things to happen. So if you imagine for 50 years, since 1970, when we first realized fully that man had this very negative impact on the planet, the anthropogenic impact, and you can look at all of the history there. In fact, WWF were created when we first realized back in 1970 that, you know, we had a challenge, our ecological way of living was under pressure. We've done some good stuff, of course we have, we've made some progress, yes we have, but we still had to declare climate emergencies. So, you know, I don't know what your definition of success is, but that's not successful, is when you are out of control. So how do we present ourselves in those 269 days? Are we in a state of emergency? Are we panicking? Are we looking for others to solve our problems? Do we feel lost at sea? Are we abandoned? Do we feel like Greta does, which is, you know, let's find someone to blame for this problem. Let's get placards and start to picket places saying down with this sort of thing. Well, let me just tell you now that that's not going to work. It just isn't. What we need is to shift our emphasis from combat to collaboration. We need to shift our emphasis from fear to hope. And we had a kind of pre-chat before we were joined by you kind people today. And one of the things I was thinking of is, and it's very stark to me, is that climate change has been sold to us now as this absolute horrendous, you know, tsunami of problems coming our way, and it is. But if we shift the mindset, so someone ticked mindset, that was 2. So mindset, if we think about the mindset of viewing climate change not as a cliff edge, but a mountain. Somebody should do something about that. Yes, I agree, somebody should do something about it. You should do something about it. I should do something about it. And by the way, we should do it together, because only by working collaboratively have we got a cat's chance in hell. If we try to have an economic approach for climate change, it will fail. If we have to have just a regulatory, circle the wagons really, really tightly and make sure things don't get worse, we're still going to fail. If we have a nature-based solution only focus for climate change, that's not going to work. So what we need, because climate change is so interconnected, so multi-layered and multi-complex, in fact, there's a term that's been used a lot, which I don't like, and this is why young people feel a bit lost at sea and a bit anxious, is it's called VUCA. It's a very volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous future we face. Yes, that might be the case, but our ancestors faced that every single decade. They faced that with wars, they faced it with famine, they faced it with, catastrophes and natural or otherwise. So we kind of softened our spirit on tackling the big issues. We kind of sometimes now feel it's not really for us to solve, but for those guys over there, or these people over there, or this government over here. And that is not going to help. That's going to just continue with combat. And people, I'm looking at Ed there, is much younger than me, and Ed's family at some time in the future are born a call just like this, speaking about exactly the same things in exactly the same way, saying, why didn't they do something back then? So what we need to agree is we need to leave our philosophical guns and holsters at the door, come together and agree that the only way we are going to get out of this, and it's kind of similar to COVID, is we need to rely on each other. We need to support each other. We need to be collaborative. We need to be international focused for that global collaboration. And we need to think about every action we do has a consequence, but not sell that to people as in your actions are going to cause problems. Let's use a more inspirational approach. So I'm as the name would suggest, half Italian, okay? But I'm also half Scottish. So sometimes my mindset switches from one to the other, and I'll explain why. If there's a big challenge, the Italian side of me goes, you know what, this sounds very exciting. Let's get this done. Let's find people. Let's get it sorted. The Scottish side goes, yeah, but what if it goes wrong? What if it doesn't work? What if people don't like it? What if people get annoyed at me for trying to stick my head above the parapet and doing something? And there's something about that attitude that we really need to get rid of, because we need to be, to stick with my metaphor earlier, when the world leaders are convening in Glasgow, circling the wagons about how tough climate change is and how challenging it is, you need to be the pioneering nation that says, you know what, it is tough and it is challenging, but we have got to go that way. We don't know what the future is, but we cannot stand still. We have to think differently. We have to be progressive. We have to be bold in our thinking, and living in that VUCA world that I explained, you can introduce certainty. You can remove ambiguity. You can remove complexity. And it all comes from mindset. Do you view the mountain as something exciting to climb, or do you view this cliff edge as something that you want to be, keeping well away from? If we focus on one, it will end any hope, not just for us, not just for COP, but for civilization. It is that serious. We have a very short time in which to make a difference, but we do have time. We absolutely do have time. And our approach in Scotland has to be predicated on, we are the country who has got collaboration in our DNA. We are the country who is fearless in our approach. And yes, we're going to get it wrong. That's fine. We'll learn from those mistakes and we'll alter course, but we cannot just go back to camp, go, well, that was tough. Somebody needs to do something about that. This is not the time for that anymore. And this is the time for Scotland to be the Scotland that we've always dreamt we were and we used to be. And some of you, and I know, will be sitting, because it's the nature of people going, yeah, that's all very well saying that, but Scotland's just a tiny little country. Here's a news flash for you. This little country, albeit 1/700th of the world's emissions, cut our emissions and grew our economy. Hopefully someone's written that down and then stuck it on a fridge magnet somewhere, because that is sensational. that bucked the trend when every other country was going, well, for us to cut emissions, we're going to have to change things. We're going to have to lose things. We're going to have to give up things. Okay. And that's the natural order of it. You think, right, well, I need to do that. So the key now is just to, how do we inspire a collaborative approach that's going to help us tackle climate change? So here we are, not that long to go before COP. What's Scotland going to be known for as we go into the unknown future? It's going to be known as the country that gets climate change, that understands its systems change required, not process change. And we can't just rely on incremental improvements over time. If we do that, we will fail. And I'll give you a classic business example for the business people on the call here. Is there's very little point in trying to improve the HMV business model when Netflix and Spotify has taken over your business. You know, so there's a disruptive element of business that's going to help provide an awful lot of solutions. And I'm looking specifically here at business people, entrepreneurs, enterprising folk, because that is, you are our last hope. You're the people who have to find climate solutions, embed them in systems, and then we can take those to the world like we used to do with some of our great Enlightenment, the economic system and so on. I could list Scottish innovation all day long, but you'll all know it far more than me, and you're probably part of it. So my proposition, and I did mention at the beginning, the proposition is that how do you inspire a region like Moray to take action in climate change? So if the council just tried to do something, and I believe they've got a net zero transition plan for the council, and that's brilliant. If the economic bodies try to do something over here, and if the nature people try to do something over there, and if the activists try to do something over here, we are heading towards failure, I'm afraid. The only way to do this is to go together. So we need this collaborative Team Moray, if you want to use that term, approach, and figure out what are the big opportunities for your region as you are embarking on the climate change adventure. It's very exciting. So we need to think about how do we inspire people into this field rather than frighten them. Because I did mention at the beginning, and I'll mention it again, and it's definitely going to be a t-shirt one day, is that fear paralyzes and hope mobilizes. If people are fearful of change, they will reject it. If they're interested and inspired by change, they'll embrace it. And again, I keep thinking about the HMV board, sitting thinking about incrementally improving the business. Let's have maybe an electric car. Let's maybe have some carbon reduction scheme here. Oh, what was that? Netflix just went flying by them. Spotify went flying by them. So there's something about being on those, about global disruption, and about how the world will be purchasing, how the world's working. Look at us today, probably sitting in bedrooms or dining rooms. Who would have thought that over a year ago? And it is still a bit awkward because we kind of miss that connection. So the region is the only way forward for me, and I would encourage you all to, after this, is to figure out how, and again that metaphor, how do you leave your gun and holsters at the door, and how do you agree that the region has to go together, and it has to go now, and it has to be disruptive but disciplined. It has to be led and predicated by a bold mountain, not cliff edge approach, and it has to be focused on showcasing the rest of Scotland and the other 31 other TSI, showing the rest of Scotland, how do you collaborate around ambition? And sometimes when I use slides, which isn't often, I read a lot of books, and some of you will have read The Prince. I call it my Tale of Two Princes, The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli from Florence, who would convince you to do something. He would try and manipulate change. He would try and manipulate you to do something that he wanted you to do, and then convince you it was your idea. Governments try to do that at times by either shaming you into feeling that you're a bad person, and or trying to entice you into a different way. I struggle sometimes with that approach. I would much rather use the Little Prince approach. For those of a certain age, you will have read Anton de Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince, and he would say, if you want to build a ship, don't assign people tasks and don't ask them to collect wood. Instead, teach them to yearn for the endless immensity of the open sea. Do you see the difference? The difference is, this is not about processes. This is not about ardor. This is not about labor. This is not about division of tasks and process. This is about collaborative adventure. You know, and I think it's really, really exciting, the narrative that we've created in Scotland. And at COP26, world leaders and including Joe Biden, which is really exciting, and John Kerry from the US, for they've not just come back into COP, the Paris Agreement, they've jumped in, and we're getting lots of dialogue from the US saying Scotland's amazing, fabulous country, lots of investable opportunities on protecting peatlands and managing biodiversity. How do we get involved in that? It's really exciting. And I mentioned earlier that Scotland hit the jackpot twice with their geology. In the first three industrial revolutions, it was a geological based kind of oil, gas, coal, etc., etc. So my thread was going towards the inspirational approach for climate change, because that is what will make people excited and make them mobilized and get them fired up to look to find collaborations rather than trying to find people to blame, rather than perpetually saying, well, and because of the various positions I've worked in government and all around Scotland in different guises, is that every sector blames the other one. Well, we could do more in transport if this sector did that, and we could do more in food, agriculture if this sector would do that. And I feel that's not helpful. It doesn't help us engender this spirit of collaboration. So here's the big opportunity for Moray. Do you become the region that makes net zero the greatest thing that can happen in the region ever? And could you do that at COP? And could you come up with some net zero transition plan which is inclusive? And could you come forward with a 10-point plan for Moray to transition to create the world's first, that's a big hint for you, the world's first net zero economy? That's really, really important, because those who will follow the Committee on Climate Change is that independent panel who give governments advice and direction on its progress towards climate change. A report was out a month ago from the Committee on Climate Change. The Chief Executive is Chris Stark, another Glaswegian. Just thought I'd mention that. Glaswegians are going to save the planet. And he said that Scotland can be the UK's first net zero economy and probably the world's. Now, Scotland's only got 32 local authorities. One of them is going to come forward soon, he says hintingly, and say we are going to create, via collaboration, driven through inspiration, mobilised through coordination and innovation, Scotland's first net zero economy in the Moray region. Now, that's a narrative no one's yet claimed, so I'm just kind of giving you that free, so you maybe want to be using that as your approach. Glasgow have said they're going to be a net zero by 2030, but that's the council, and Edinburgh has done the same, but that's the council. So maybe you can think about an expanded fellowship. And I was looking at Pamela's beautiful screensaver earlier, and it was the Shire, and there's something, and it made me think about what we need here is this endeavour is quite similar to Lord of the Rings. If we go alone, we're going to fail. It's going to be an arduous journey, but it's going to be exciting and it's going to be an adventure. And we have to be a fellowship on this. This is not for an agency to solve. This is not for a government to solve. This is for a societal shift. So it's really exciting. I've made a couple of little notes to remind me about key things. So I just want to very briefly mention COP26, why it is the single most important meeting that will happen in any one of your lifetimes and mine. Because there's been 25 COPs that have come and gone. 24 of them, failure. Nothing really happened because there was an impasse between fear and hope, and I'll explain that. There was a lot of the previous COPs were predicated on what do we have to lose sort of conversations, So a lot of countries will come together saying, well, your economy is their own kind of economy and your kind of economy is their own kind of economy. So we can't really shift ours in a global perspective because your economy has got a different sort of metrics. So we can't really work in a global partnership. Now you can read into this what you want, but the only real successful COP so far was Paris. And it was the only COP that was run by women. I'm just throwing that out there as an interesting point to note. And I see Lucy smiling, is that because Christiana Figueres was the hero, her and a few other women and some guys for COP in Paris, because the conversations were predicated on, and here's a newsflash, what do we have to gain from tackling climate change? So 24, what are we going to lose if we don't do it? Negative, combative, blame orientated to, do you know what do we have to gain by tackling climate change in a collaborative space? If the whole world is behind this agenda, if the whole world creates the certainty of the destination for the future, we can then assemble ourselves to fit that narrative. We can now, and if HMV Video branch had to recreate themselves, they wouldn't have shops, let's be honest. So they're going to have to think about competing with Spotify. And again, I keep emphasizing the point. There is little point in trying to retrofit a system that didn't work that well in the first place, and people have already moved on. So if the global agreement in Paris back in 2015 said, and it was very successful, it said, look, let's do this together and let's think about what we have to gain. But what was missing from Paris is what we have to provide in Glasgow. And I'll be very clear about this. Paris had the global agreement, but no plan. So there wasn't a, okay, Scotland, UK, here's what you have to do to maximize. Okay, Italy, here's your plan. Okay, US. And then, of course, and I'll say it briefly because I don't want to give the guy the airtime, but Donald Trump came into the whole scene a few years back and changed a lot of global politics. He changed a lot of how people see the environment. He emphasized, and it was successful, fear. He said, look, this climate change stuff, fake, doesn't really matter, fake news. Let's just get back into shale, coal, oil, gas, etc., 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 and we'll create lots of jobs. And it worked. So what I would say is that we now have this massive dilemma facing us now that Joe Biden's in place, is that he's there on a prospect of bringing the United States back together under an umbrella of climate change. Now, that's great, but it will be very short-lived unless he can show that America's race for being net zero is an economically rich one, is that it solves problems, that it creates opportunities, that it creates jobs. So keep that really boldly in your mind, because our endeavour in Scotland to pursue climate change isn't switching lots of things off, isn't having a less enjoyable life, isn't living a miserable meat-free environment. You know, these are all part of the agenda, but it isn't one or the other. So what we need to think about is how do we engender, and again, I mentioned that fellowship of the willing. So COP26 in Glasgow is approaching, honestly, like a runaway train. Some people view it terrified. I view it as hugely exciting. It is our chance, and probably our only chance, and Scotland's greatest chance, to stand up and show the world that we are not, this is the Glasgow word, I do apologise, feared. It means afraid. We're not afraid of change. We're not afraid of innovation. We're not afraid of each other. We trust each other to do the right thing, and we're going to collaborate to make it happen. So I think that's maybe 20 odd minutes I've chatted. Incidentally, I'm the youngest of 13 children, so I can talk all day long, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look to Edward to see if this is an appropriate time to kind of stop and see. Let's get into some questions.
Great, thanks so much for that, Martin. That's really brilliant. And yeah, I'm loving the idea of Moray being the first net zero economy. So let's see what we can do. But so with that in mind, actually, there's a few questions that I can group around. Well, in particular, there's a question around the MOD and the RAF. So we have a strong presence of the MOD and the RAF in Moray. How do they affect our emissions, and are they included in Moray's emissions, or are they somehow counted as UK-wide emissions? Do we need to include those?
I think I would include them, to be honest, because as much as they have emissions from their operations, they will have opportunities in their operations. They will have land, and land can be a carbon sequester. So again, and I'm not saying this happens, but if we just all grab placards today and ran outside the MOD's buildings and said, down with this sort of thing, do you think that's going to have a big impact? And at this point, I'd like to remind people that the people who have been at Faz Lane have been there for 31 years with placards saying, down with this sort of thing. Faz Lane's still there. I'm not saying it's a wasted endeavour. I'm just saying is that let's use our full intellect to try and drive change. So let's go and work with the MOD, and they're human beings just like you. Let's sit and chat and say, this land over here, could we turn it into a tree sanctuary? Could we we start to think about developing peatlands? Could we think about some solutions, climate solutions? Could we use these vast areas of land and put solar farms on them using battery power storage, and then tackle fuel poverty, create some jobs? Let's turn MOD land into the solar fields and solar farms of the future. That's the point I'm getting at, Edward, is that I could find combat in every single human you've got on this call and explain why they're to blame. But I'm not going to do that. I want to try and figure out, okay, I understand that's the case, but let's have another case. Let's open another case and have a chat about that. So this is why we need to be far more collaborative and rather than combative. I don't know if that answers, but I know what hasn't worked. I'm 60 this year. Yes, I don't look old enough. I hear you say that, but I'm 60 this year, and I've been involved in the environment sector for an awful long time. And I know combat has not worked, will not work. And that is not how we're going to solve this. This is a collective endeavor, adventure. It's a collective adventure. That would probably be your strapline for your net zero economy, the collective adventure of Moray. Anyway, I'll leave it at that point for more questions, and I'll try and be more succinct.
No, that's fine. Thanks so much. I mean, there's one in a similar vein, really, around we've got again a strong presence of the whiskey distillery industry in Moray. I imagine your answer is the same as the MOD response, but yes, they are a major emitter. Yeah, and actually there's a question around how do we actually get these big emitters into the room? So how do we get them onto this call? tsiMORAY is a third sector organization which naturally has a membership of third sector groups, but this issue is cross sector. We want to be working together, as you say, with everybody who's interested in making progress. How do we get these big emitters in the room?
So let's just agree we'll do it. So here's an idea. If we have another round table like this, maybe in person one day, who knows? But if we have another round table like this, I will bring you whatever chief executive from whatever whiskey sector you want. If you think about it, and this is something a lot of people maybe don't realize, is that you see the plant and the emissions and the pipe and the towers, and you see those sort of things. But the whiskey sector is the golden sector in Scotland. We always talk up the whiskey sector. In fact, only last week in Burns Night, they announced a net zero transition plan for 2040 for the entire sector and its supply chains. That is fantastic. So that's 5 years earlier than the government's going to go, 5 years early. So that's pretty good. And the entire sector, apart from maybe one or two private distilleries, who actually may even be doing better things, but the sector as a collective have come together. And people see, when you're in the supermarkets, this brand, that brand, and that's competition, that's good for business. Behind the scenes, they are the most collaborative sector on this nation of ours and probably in the country. They agreed back in 2009 that the environment was a non-competitive part of the business, so that they could work behind the scenes and collaborate on solutions for using water, solutions for growing barley, solutions for energy systems, and so on. So behind the scenes, very combative. In front of your eyes, very commercially competitive, and that is good. But and there's no other sector in Scotland, not one, that works anywhere near as competitively as the whiskey sector. And there's some whiskey producers, Ardbeg, Arbroath. I know that's not in your region, but near enough, I suppose, is it? It's got the world's first carbon positive gin. The world's first carbon positive gin, and they've got carbon neutral whiskey, and the brothers that are working there are pushing every single opportunity to be the world's first carbon positive whiskey to be ready for COP. So watch this space, it's fantastic. And the distillers in Moray, let's just let's just get them on the table and have a chat like this, and I guarantee they will come. What businesses don't want is to be brought into the firing squad for a bunch of angry people who. So let's just be, and again, back to my initial point, collaborative. Any more questions?
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm hearing from you there. There's an invitation when we're ready to use you as a resource for bringing these people around the table.
100%, 100%, and we'll do it. I could do it for you, no problem. We've done it time and time and time again. Can I mention something about businesses just briefly, because I think there might be a thread about, well, maybe businesses should do more. In 2009, the UK government were going to Copenhagen COP to launch a 34% emission reduction target by 2020. Okay, write that down. 2020, 34%. In Scotland, I established a group of business leaders, and we set up a group called the 2020 Climate Group, 30 chief executives from across business, right? And me. And we said to the then First Minister, 34% is too slow, it's not good enough. We think you could go higher, and businesses will help you do that. And we convinced them, which wasn't easy, okay? Governments don't like to be pushed out of the comfort zone, right? And we said, listen, why don't we go to Copenhagen and launch the world's highest climate change targets? You could almost see them going, excuse me, are we able to do that? And we said, yeah, because these businesses, BT, Royal Mail, Stagecoach, Tesco, they all got round the table, SSE, Scottish Power, Lloyds Bank, they were all round the table, every one of them. And we said, we're going to go for it, and we're going to use the business focus. Cutting a long story short, we set a emission target of 42% emission by 2020. Guess what we're sitting at today? When everyone said 42%, you know, the UK is going for 34. Are we kidding ourselves here in Scotland? We're sitting at 51. 51. That is staggering. That is just shows you what we can achieve when we do it. After three, everyone, together, collaboratively, innovation, you know, inspiration, not you should do something about that. That just won't work. So businesses are your key partner in this whole endeavor, I would suggest.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm seeing a lot at the moment is a growing focus on ESG investing, so environmental, social governance investing, and their companies are more under the spotlight than ever on these issues.
Yes, I was, yeah. On the ESG, the investment part, it was something I should have mentioned. So thanks to remind me of that. I was at an event like this with Bloomberg and BlackRock and all of the big investors. And they said, and don't tell anyone so we can keep it from Moray, but they said that there has never been so much investment for low carbon technologies and renewable energy, etc., floating about the system. They reckoned that 5% of the world's economy is looking for investment. You might think, well, that's not a lot. That's hundreds of trillions. That is a serious lot of money. And again, COP presents us with the opportunity for these investors to go, you see what's happening in Scotland? That's a country that's got its mojo. That's a country that has a plan, and it's got a very innovative, creative way of doing stuff. And by the way, it's a very business-focused, entrepreneurial approach they've got. And let's get investment over there, because let's be honest, Edward, we need investment. And the public purse, not now or ever, will ever be able to afford from a tax take the sort of level of investment we need to transition, you know, hydrogen economies, etc. So we need the private investor, and private sector do not invest in concepts. They invest in prospects. That's why I think you guys are on a real, you've got a really good opportunity here to get a list of the top 10 low carbon prospects for Moray, and then get an investors roundtable after we do the risky one. And then let's see the color of their money.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I love the fact that you're taking us to these big ideas, and you're stretching my my mind and what's possible. Moving on to the Scottish government, I think in the spirit of what's positive, what is the Scottish government doing to support people like us in Moray that want to create meaningful change on tackling climate change in our local area? What are they doing already, and perhaps what do you think they could do more of?
So this is the classic chicken and egg scenario, you know, if the government front load everything, will businesses be that inclined? Possibly not. If government don't look like they're really taking climate change seriously, businesses will either do one or two things. They will fill the void by stepping in and providing some solutions or doing leadership, or they will say, well, Scotland doesn't really feel like the sort of country to me. And it's my one big worry, and I'm not a negative person, but my one big worry about this whole agenda is that, and I'm glad you've addressed it, is that 2045 is a bit too late for me. I want to go back to where we were in Copenhagen, thinking 2045 is too late. So if you think about competition on a global scale, Norway 2040, Sweden 2035, Finland 2030, net zero as a nation, New Zealand 2030. So if I was an investor wanting to find a nation that's got its act together and it's got lots of climate solutions and lots of intellectual property, I can get, you're going to come to Scotland when our target's 2045. So that's my big slight concern, is that we maybe need to now up the ante and be a bit more bold. And do you know what will help the Scottish Government? Is when you do it in Moray. You then become this ambition loop. You show what can happen in a region driven by collaboration. And I saw a brilliant note on there from Stephen McTaggart from the Herald, who has been unbelievably important in this agenda. So maybe you should reach out after this, Edward, to Stephen, because a lot of the media are causing quite a lot of the problems. They are just socializing negativity all day long. It's funny when you watch the news and read the papers, it's all negative climate change, yet you go onto LinkedIn and Twitter and it's all positive. Literally have a look and you'll see what I mean by that. Is because there's something about fear sells really well, but the Herald is bucking the trend there. They're trying to showcase the opportunities from Scotland that we can have in tackling climate change. And I'm sure Stephen would be very keen, not that I'm lining him up to speak to you, but he really should come and speak to you guys and figure out how he can engender that fellowship of the willing. So this isn't just for governments, this is for everyone, Edward. And I think I would always think about that ambition loop, think about showcasing in Moray what everyone else needs to do. Net zero economy, a collaborative approach, not relying on someone else to solve it, and being very creative and stretch your minds. This is the time to think big. And people like me, we're public sector servants. I work for you. You can just call on me anytime and I'll be here to help, and I'll bring other people to that table with you. So let's get on with it. Let's get it done.
That's great. Thanks so much. So there's in a way I'd quite like to end there, but there's two other things I wanted to just ask you. One was what other organizations, what other support is there out there for communities to work with on technical innovation to develop and test new net zero models and potential projects?
So here's something you'll like, is that this is what's quite unique about Scotland. I should have mentioned that when I said we cut our emissions faster than any country in the G20, you maybe went, well, that's pretty good, that's interesting. I forgot to tell you why. So let me just remind you what we are as a nation. And it's something about the Scots, we don't like being glib. We very rarely like to say, look at me, look how good we are. It's not a Scottish thing, and it jars at times. It jars with me at times trying to be optimistic, but of course I'm relying on my Italian side to help me with that. But there's something about, in the midst of a global pandemic, trying to sound optimistic about anything seems a bit glib, when sadly there's people, you know, who are losing their lives, and many more still will. So it's a really tough time at the moment. But I would argue the one thing we need more than anything now is hope. We need a light at the end of that tunnel. We need people to feel a bit of hope and something to hang on to and something to look forward to. And it isn't going back to the failed systems of the past. We need to build back better. We need to think about the new way. Third sector, you're the perfect architects for that, because you bring businesses, governments, agencies of government, regulators and nature agencies all into the same space. And I suggest you do that. And then let's just start to rehearse what a net zero economy in Moray looks like and what partners can be involved. So quickly list this. We have the greatest number of universities per head of population in any country in the world. Let's use it. We have 7 innovation centres. 7 innovation centres. That's more than the whole of Canada, and Scotland's a tiny wee place. So we've got 7 innovation centres. Let's use them. You have a nature agency, Nature Scot, formerly known as Scottish Natural Heritage. Always got to put that in because it's quite new, who are producing right now nature-based solutions as a way to tackle climate change. You have an environmental protection agency, SEPA, the first of its kind in the world, that has at its core protect and enhance the environment in ways that develop sustainable economic growth and well-being. When would you ever hear a regulatory agency speaking about well-being? So my point I'm getting at is that we have this Avengers Assemble of all, this is called the no excuse era for climate change. I won't hear anyone now telling me why we can't solve these problems, because I know we can. And I know we've got the agencies of government aligned to help you. What's probably missing, Edward, is if you create this bold vision for the region, and then you call on these public sector agencies, right, I need you to help me with identifying the nature-based solutions in Moray. Have a look at the MOD site and work with them. Tell us what the nature-based solutions are. Tell me what our geographical advantage is. If you've got some hills, you've got some rivers, you can get heat from rivers, you can get wind from hills. So let's have a look at what your assets are, your natural capital. Anyway, I did explain, I was going to try and do a shorter answer, so I do apologize at that.
No, it's great. I'm interested. So what would you say to those who think that relying on investors within the current system is trying to fix the problem using the same thinking that caused the problem in the first place? So I suppose this is a question around, to what extent do we revolt and create a new system versus working with the system that we've already got?
Yeah, they aren't using the same system thinking. They completely changed it. So if you follow economists like Mariana Mazzucato, people can maybe write that name down, Kate Raworth, Catherine Trebeck, these are famous authors, all who have worked in Scotland to some degree. Mariana Mazzucato was part of the First Minister's economic advisors, and they are presenting a new way to create an economy that has well-being at its core. And the BlackRocks, the big investment bodies are all following that model. So they are all now looking at, and I know I've said this a few times, the Spotify, Netflix model. They're not trying to improve the system that was there. They realized that didn't work. And investors still wedded to trying to squeeze some value and revenue from a dead system or a system in decline is nonsensical. Investors, one thing they don't like doing is losing money. So we, like I say, and maybe your delegates haven't been to some of these events, but there's thousands of them happening. The Green Investment Summit happened a month ago, and Mark Carney, former governor, Bank of England, is now climate ambassador for finance, global finance, and we have him come to an event in March, which we can speak about another day. And they are predicating the entire economic system for investment going forward is based on these visionaries like Mazzucato, Raworth, Trebeck. So that's the clearest answer I can give, is that they're not trying to address the system through the same lens and the same metrics with the same triage. And if they are HMV, right? They're going to be lost. The new models for economics, and again, Scotland now has the Scottish National Investment Bank, SNIB, and SNIB is mission orientated. So someone can Google later, Scottish National Investment Bank, mission orientated bank. Where did that come from? Mariana Mazzucato. So Scotland's economic system is listening to these futuristic, visionary, and they're all women, again, just thought I'd mention that, but they're listening to these people and taking the learning from them. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. And of course, in a future economy, we've got young people growing up now who are going to move into that new economy. And we did invite schools onto this call, and in the course of time, we can certainly do more work to engage young people in this assembly. But a question to you, Martin, how do we seize the power of young people to help change the language grown-ups are using from competitive to collaborative?
Yeah, first thing I would do is listen to them. That would be good. And inspire them to think about hope at the moment. And it's not meant to be a criticism of Greta Thunberg, but she has got this army of young people who are feeling lost at sea. They're very annoyed at you and me for the decisions we've made in the past and the world that they are in at the moment. And yes, they've every right to do that. Mea culpa, as we say in Italy, right? Have every right to do that, because we have made stupid decisions based on long-term thinking, short-term thinking rather than long-term fact, right? Park that and think about what we want young people to be now. We need them to be hopeful. We need to be collaborative. We need them to be innovative. And the number one thing to the mindset is they have to be fearless. You know, they absolutely have to be fearless and say, yes, it is a challenge, but I'm going to have a go, and I might get it wrong, but I'm going to keep at it. That is, everyone would want their children to think that way, not just about climate change, but about everything. You know, you might not be able to solve this equation in maths now, but if you keep at it, you know, and if you ask someone for help, and if you seek some support before you know it, you're going to be doing that. So, and the thing about, one thing that was on my resume that I feel very proud of is when we created that 2020 climate group back for Copenhagen, we thought when we were getting nearer to the targets, we thought we're going to smash these targets. We're going to beat 42% probably in 2017, let alone 2020. So why don't we create a young group? So we did the 2050 climate group. Someone can Google that or share their link. I would be very grateful. This is now over 500 strong young people, all under 30. So you could probably still make it, Edward, of 500 people who are all working in some part of Scotland's economy, who will be the us of the future, and they are grounded in climate solutions. So they are going to be the systems thinkers of the future. And I don't like to use the word future because the future is today. So they're dealing with these issues right now. So if someone can have a look at the 2050 climate group, it's a voluntary organization, go and get involved. And that's really, really exciting for me, is that our young people now aren't just picking up a placard. Do you know what I mean by that? They're coming to you saying, I want to get involved. How can I help? Really exciting times.
That's fantastic, Martin. And as you're, despite the underestimation of my age there, everything else just seems completely spot on. And thanks for taking the time to not only be with us at this event now, but clearly it seems like you're very present in the future for future collaboration, support, and linking us together as we move forward with the work that we're doing locally and linking that nationally. So
very happy to do that.
I'm so very grateful, and I would just encourage everybody on the call, if you can find the right emoji, to offer a virtual hand clap.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. But time to walk the walk. That's what I would say. You know, this is your time. You'll never have a time like this again, Edward. Never. Scotland only gets one COP. It's 9 months away. Are we going to be ready, or are we going to miss the opportunity? Let's make sure we're ready. So thank you for having me. So shall I just put my camera off now and just disappear for a while, or?
Yeah, well, you put yourself on mute. You're welcome to stay on the call. We're going to move into some breakout rooms. So I do want to just explain how that's going to work.
Okay, well, listen, I'll go then, let you go on with it. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, if there's any specific questions for me, you can email them to me later, and I guarantee now I'll answer everyone. So thank you for that, and enjoy the rest of your week, people.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thanks now. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Excellent. So with that call to action, I would love to invite you all to move into breakout rooms. This is an opportunity for us to connect with each other, to start the collaboration process. We certainly don't have to dot all the I's and cross all the T's in this space, but it's just a chance to kick things off and get things moving. So the question is, what action are you inspired to take leading up to COP26 to achieve net zero in Moray? So when you get into your breakout room, if you could ideally appoint somebody to be a note taker and also a spokesperson. We're not going to be able to hear back from every group just because there's so many people on the call, but great if a spokesperson from your group can feed back some of your ideas. So this is obviously a platform and a forum based on supporting those people in Moray itself. And we do have people from all around the world. So you are still very welcome, and we'd love to hear your ideas on what's working in your communities. So feed those into the mix, and we'd love to hear that in the spirit of global collaboration. So the question, what action are you inspired to take leading up to COP26 to achieve net zero in Moray? And I will ask Pamela to put us now into breakout rooms.
An offer from EDF Energy for a community investment a proposed onshore wind farm at Clashgower, which is in the forest hinterland near Edenkilly. EDF said that they wanted to deal with a single body for this investment opportunity that would represent all the communities of Moray and a part of East Nairnshire that's close to the site. There was a consultation event held in November 17 by EDF's local representatives, who are called Force 9 Energy, and this event was called Community Ownership in Renewable Energy, and it was attended by various interested parties, including a number of community councillors. Now, Moray is lucky in that all community council chairs meet regularly under an initiative called the Joint Community Councils of Moray, or JCC, to discuss issues of common interest. And following that November 17 event, the JCC began talking about shared ownership in renewables generally, and more specifically, the possible opportunity at Clashgower. And the main contact between Force 9 Energy and Energising Moray is Graham Hilditch, who was the chair of Forres Community Council at this early stage of the proceedings. In May 2019, a JCC conference on community renewable energy was held in Elgin, supported by Moray Leader. And 55 people came to that event, representing a wide variety of local organisations. And they heard presentations from various bodies, such as the National Investment Bank, Rousey Development Trust in Orkney, Local Energy Scotland, Community Energy Scotland, and so on, and engaged in some pretty lively group discussions in smaller groups. Following on from that, a larger working group went on a day trip supported by HIE to visit Huntly Development Trust, during which we saw their wind turbine and heard a lot about what they have managed to achieve by investing in wind power and what we could possibly achieve by such an investment as Energising Moray. Now, in the meantime, Force 9 had requested supportive local organisations to sign a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, about the Clashgower project, which refers to a potential 5% community ownership stage in the development. Now, all of this is not without its small controversies, and it's important that I mention a couple of things at this point. The first one is that Clashgower does not have planning consent at present, and their application is now at an appeal with the Scottish Government after a recent hearing. The second is that signing up to the MOU does not imply support for that planning application. Rather, it implies support for becoming involved in the investment should that consent be granted. And so far, at least 12 local bodies have signed the MOU, including 6 of our community councils. Following on from the Huntly trip, a smaller steering group was set up under the auspices of the JCC, and that group have secured a grant from CARES that will enable us to set up a new body with a formal constitution that would enable an investment to be made if the Clashgower project goes forward. And having taken some initial professional advice, the steering group have settled on the creation of a Community Benefit Society, or BENCOM, which is a kind of cooperative, as an appropriate way forward. And we hope that the new body will be registered within the next couple of months. And if Clashgower does get its consent, that would then enable Energising Moray to raise community share investment capital to then put into the project. No name has yet been decided for this formal body, although it's likely to include the key elements of Moray, community and energy in the name. But the steering group are not solely focused on the Clashgower project. There may, for instance, be other similar opportunities that arise elsewhere, although there is nothing specific in the pipeline at the moment. But there are also some quite different possibilities on the same theme of renewable energy, and one that emerged last year was the possibility of creating a community climate action hub for Moray. This began as a Scottish Government initiative under the umbrella of the Climate Challenge Fund, And the government called for expressions of interest in the creation of what they called a regional network of community climate support hubs. And they got a lot of interest in this. There were over 80 submissions, including one from Energising Moray, which we put in July of last year, which stated that the vision for such a hub in Moray could be to create a body that would significantly accelerate progress towards a carbon neutral Moray, create green jobs, create more sustainable rural communities through the development of green transport, and build more public awareness and allow more community engagement. So that was July, and we have duly been awaiting developments. There's been nothing specific so far, although recently the minister involved, who is Rosanna Cunningham, did say that there was progress being made, and at some point in the near future there would be an announcement of some kind about how this was going to be taken forward. Now, a crucial issue here is how many of these hubs might the government like to support? I think the civil servants who drafted the initial documents were probably thinking about half a dozen throughout Scotland. Now, that's possibly all very well if you live in Edinburgh or Aberdeen, but it's clearly not likely to engage the citizens of rural Scotland if there are only half a dozen of them in our main cities. So I know that our submission, and indeed many others, emphasise the idea that there should be a much larger number of these hubs so that local people could genuinely engage with them. And a suggestion that was made on several occasions was that there should be one for each local authority area, for example. If that were to come to pass, what might such a hub do? Well, it would promote low carbon initiatives throughout Moray. It could bring groups together who are already working on low carbon initiatives throughout the area. It could inform the public about these and support new initiatives. It could help communities apply for funding to set up, for example, development trusts and to apply for funds for renewable energy projects. And it could support the alleviation of fuel poverty, which is quite a significant issue in Moray. Energising Moray has set up a subgroup very recently to look at taking this forward, and that's being led by Joan Megson, who's here with us today. So Energising Moray has made some good progress, but the situation is obviously currently very tentative. We don't know if EDF will get planning consent for Glashgower. If they do, we're still some way off from having any details about what their investment offer will actually entail. We don't know when there will be an announcement about climate action hubs, or when there is, if there will be a prospect for one in Moray. So, as I said, Martin talked about identifying some big opportunities in the area. And although these involving Energising Moray are still at an early stage, I know that looking around at the names of the attendees today, there are many more possibilities here, and we're not short of those who are inspiring hope and mobilising action. So good luck with all the very many projects that I know that you're involved in. Finally, Energising Moray are also aware that in these rather strange times, it's more difficult than usual to communicate with all of those who have an interest in the topics of community investment and climate action hubs. The last public meeting we were able to conduct was just over a year ago now in Elgin. So we're very grateful to Edward and his colleagues at tsiMORAY for this opportunity to give everyone here an update about our plans, and we hope to be in touch with you all again as these plans and ideas become more concrete. Thanks very much indeed for your time.
Thanks so much, Alec, for that update, and just fantastic to hear the work that can often just be done behind the scenes, and just to make that a bit visible at this assembly. It also just struck me that if the climate action hubs happen and there's money that can come through to support that's great, and also this assembly can move forward and make things happen regardless of those outcomes. So it's fantastic to know that all that works there, and we can see how things move forward with this assembly. So I would love to just get a snapshot from the breakout groups. So hopefully you assigned a spokesperson. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, there's reactions, and in reactions you should be able to raise your hand. So if anybody would like to just give us a little flavor of what action you heard in your group that people were inspired to take leading up to COP26 and beyond to achieve net zero in Moray. So Carol Ann Adams.
Hi there. We had a really good session actually, and I know it's all about networking. What we discovered was that there's a group in Findhorn that are looking at carbon neutrality, and they've got some issues with a sewage system. So through my connections, I'm going to put them in contact with a water quality innovation group at UHI. So that was really beneficial. We had a retired gentleman that's growing his own food. So through my connections, I'm going to put him in contact with the forest area food producers, and he might be able to get some hints and tips on releasing some of the carbon issues that he's got on his land and what might grow better for him. Anne is from the Sky Climate Action Group, and she was just talking about the number of unused crofts on Sky and what can be done maybe to release them from being owned by people that aren't actually living in the area, and that people would be able to generate some income from it as well. And Alan Robertson was from the Scottish Rural Network, and we were saying how beneficial his e-newsletter is about what's going on in the area and some funding that can be available. And Ali from Restore in Moray, she was having to serve customers through most of it, but she did mention that she was finding it beneficial just to hear what's going on in the area and to connect with people. So we had a really useful breakout session. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that concise reporting back. Ariane Burgess.
Thanks. Yeah, we had a great discussion too. Gosh, where to begin? So Stuart from HIE was sharing very useful kind of baseline information, things like, so I think what came out of that is what we need is some asset mapping that tells us what's already going on in Moray that's good, and also what are the kind of negatives. And clearly we know that. So I learned that when all the offshore wind energy comes into Moray through Keith, I think, and did I know that? So and that Moray has the highest forest cover in Scotland, I think 30%, so pretty good. But do we know this? So Karen Cox was there from Outfit Moray, and she spoke about the work that they do with young people, and we were discussing about how important that is. Like, that's kind of baseline, reconnecting young people to nature so that they have an understanding of how can they, if they became business people in the future, how could they think about working with nature rather than against it. And then Talis, who's working with the Findhorn Foundation, offered the possibility of there's somebody working within the community who does a lot of carbon measuring, knows how to do that. So possibly that's an offer there. And also that the community has skill sets around distributed heating. So, talking about how do we address the fuel poverty in a collective way rather than just changing individual households. We also talked about the whiskey industry and how can we support them to move from move their freight onto trains, and is that possible? Another thread that came up kind of out of that was how do we do some kind of integrated transport system where we're not, yes, we need private cars, but how many do we need, and can we do a much better system where it's safe for people to really cycle and walk? That people have access to mobility that is carbon neutral or low carbon emission. What else do we had
Ariane, thanks very much for that feedback. I've got quite a few hands up, so it's great to have that snapshot. Lisa Mead.
Thanks. Edward. I'll be quick. So it was a really good discussion. Sandy Bond is from the Scottish Youth Parliament. He's a representative for Moray, and he talked about restoring the peat bogs around Speyside, which generated a discussion around how that might happen with young people getting involved, and connections that other group members had with Trees for Life. And Alice from the Whale and Dolphin Centre was on there, and it was generally very interesting chat. We also thought that a bigger picture of what's happening already in Moray would be helpful, that, you know, in the interconnections, if that's possible, a kind of mapping of that, so that we get, one, inspired, and two, we can kind of see what's going on and who we might contact about different things. So I don't know if that's a job for TSI, but that was definitely a request from a good few of us. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lisa. Over to Gordon McAlpine.
Thank you. We were 4 in our group. We came up with a series of ideas. First was to put solar farms on the top of the MOD roof space at Kinloss. They've built a lot of new hangars. There's an incredible amount of roof space. Green fuel for planes. We believe that's possible. Could we grow it here in Moray? Got land not being used that could be used for that. Or can we produce it from waste? Making charge points in new houses mandatory, so there's electric charge points. Electric vehicle infrastructure. I'm a little bit involved in a project at the Findhorn Eco Village to look at how do you, if we're all going to have electric cars by 2030, how do you actually charge them? Especially in places where not everybody can have, like apartments, flats, where you can't have a charger in your own home. How do we solve that? Hydrogen in Moray, is there a case for, could we have hydrogen projects using the fuel being, the electricity being generated in the evening, at night time when it's not being used domestically? Could that be turned into hydrogen, and could we use that to fuel our buses for public transport? Findhorn River could be good for generating energy. Is that feasible? Turbine blades, what happens to turbine blades? Is there a way, instead of putting them into landfill, can they be reused, recycled, or some other methods? Can we look at our whole transport system? A lot of waste material gets sent to Aberdeen, for example. Someone just mentioned the whiskey industry. Also, can we rationalize our transport system to use less carbon, e.g. by using the railway lines, which are underused, or by using all the harbours, the ports we have in Moray? Can that be used? Is that a more rational, reduced carbon way of doing things? Those were our ideas.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Gordon. Over to Caroline. You've got your hand up.
Hello. So Group 12 had a very interesting group of people as well. Lots of goals and sort of common ideas emerging from, various different size projects. I'm actually in the Highlands, so not quite Moray, but still along similar lines. So the sort of things that we were discussing, key ideas that came out were how it's important for groups to work to change the mindset of local communities, to create more of a responsibility within that community, a responsibility of feeling for the assets around them, and ownership as well, community ownership. Because when people feel responsible or take ownership in something, they're more likely to look out for its interests and sort of build towards its legacy. We also talked a lot about how it's important for like-minded groups all around the region and all around the country, really, to find ways to join up through things like this, to sort of share experiences, share knowledge, and lift each other up and work together. And through working locally, you're able to create that sort of network. That was one thing that we did talk about as well. Is it important to take action for all the sort of time that we spend sort of sitting and talking about these things, actually getting the boots on the ground and taking action. towards an environmental goal, it doesn't matter how small that action is absolutely crucial, because that way you can lead by example. And we talked about how there is a lot of, not pressure, but there's a lot of weight on the third sector to sort of be the change and to sort of lead the way forward. And I think with COP26 happening this year, that's going to be absolutely crucial. We need to be able to show that we can be the change, we can lead by example, we can show our local communities, local people and businesses how we can be more sustainable in easy ways. And it was really lovely to hear from Joanna Summers in Port Gordon. They've set up a seaside garden due to COVID mostly, but they've got the whole community involved in creating this beautiful space where people can learn how to grow their own food. They can learn about how to garden in general, as well as enjoy a really lovely community space down by the sea. And little projects like that leads to all sorts of different avenues. You know, you can put the garden in place, but from there, who knows who will end up using it and for what purpose. And, you know, that creating that community asset there has endless bounds. And we also spoke with, sorry, I didn't get her name, but it was M. Henley from the Speyside Nature Reserve. And they've already started taking steps to cut down their carbon footprint. Instead of having rangers travel in from outside the nature reserve, using cars and creating carbon emissions, they're actually training up a team of volunteer rangers who can go in and check around the reserve and carry out maintenance work, engaging local people in that asset and getting them, you know, sort of involved with it and taking that ownership. So training them up, as well as cutting down the emissions of the nature reserve in general. So it was really, really great to hear that we're all on the same page and we're all pulling in the same direction, and we are starting to join up together. And these small actions that we take every day are going to lead to an avalanche of action later on down the line.
Beautifully summed up there, Caroline. Thanks so much. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to let the meeting run over a little bit, so I sort of beg for your forgiveness for that. But it'd be great just to carry on hearing from the different groups. So, Kerry Williams.
Hi. Apologies, my camera isn't working, so you just have to talk look at my name there. Yeah, I think what the pandemic has taught us in the last year is we've been forced to do things differently, possibly a lot quicker than we had to. So in terms of you know, travel, business travel, we've definitely cut down on our carbon emissions. So that's something that we're looking at as an organisation is, you know, perhaps do we need to do as many business miles? Now we've got the equipment and the functionality to do meetings online. Is this the way forward? So, you know, that's going to save us in the long run. Within the group, probably echoing previous comments actually. So looking towards sort of community-led projects, the Port Gordon garden community, shopping with local suppliers. I know the Moray Food Network is quite big at the moment. So again, we're sort of reducing food miles by being able to walk to our local shops and knowing that the produce is local as well. And again, you know, helping out local farmers. Electric charging points, again, somebody mentioned that is about having the facilities available. But again, having if we're encouraged to buy electric vehicles within the next 10 years, are we in a position still, are we confident that we can use those vehicles and have the charging points at various areas in the region, that we're not going to run out of electricity halfway up a mountain? And also just making Moray more green in terms of the green routes that we have, cycling, the walking routes, and making those more accessible to everybody between the towns and cities. There are obviously a lot of people now taking up more exercise because of being in lockdown situations. So is that something, again, we can look forward to and reduce the CO2 emissions that we're using with transport? But again, you know, welcome for other people people's feedback.
Great, thank you very much, Kerry, for that. So we've got 4 people left with their hands up. If they're happy to find the essential point and cut straight to it, that'd be great. So go for Fabio.
Thank you. So a lot of our people in our group felt that they had a strong interest and a strong inspiration to do something, but no sense of agency, no way, didn't feel they had a way of doing taking meaningful action. And so that was certainly a theme that ran through. However, there has been a commitment from at least 3 of the participants to collaborate on bringing together an asset map of what we've got in Moray in terms of action that deals with the climate emergency. And we are asset rich. We've got 3 volunteers for that. We got a volunteer for offering mentoring to people or organizations who are focusing on this agenda going forward. And there was a suggestion that tsiMORAY may want to, maybe in a good position to take the lead in coordinating a collaborative group, taking up the challenge from Martin of coming up with a 10-point plan for a zero Moray, net zero Moray. And my response to that was, yes, we have taken the lead, we're happy to lead, and we're happy to follow. So we're happy to continue to provide an opportunity for people to connect and create change through the Climate Assembly and other forums and networks we support and manage. And we're also happy and delighted to be supporting the efforts by Energizing Moray and to work with them. And so to follow where followership is needed, and absolutely delighted to work in collaboration with all sorts of players at local, regional, national, and international level. And I think that's the salient points.
Thank you very much, Fabio. Fiona, Rob.
Hi, yeah, we were really mulling over how do we move forward from here and who is going to lead. And Joan Megson, who's on the Energising Moray steering group, was there, and it seemed appropriate that although we don't have the Climate Challenge hub physically in Moray at the moment, that there is a virtual hub, and that seemed the best route for everybody to be feeding into. And we know there's the support from TSI and HI to connect wider, for that group to connect wider. So an example was Carol Ann from Interface and Martin suggesting that we should be engaging more with our universities. So that was an immediate connection that we could make and grow that and become a climate change movement. Was kind of the theme of the discussion. Hope that captures it, people.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you so much, Fiona, for that. Over to Chris Cranston. Chris, are you with us? I'll ask you to unmute.
That'd be better.
Yep, that's great.
Yep. So yeah, passion in the group about rewilding, both on land and marine rewilding, to try and get nature working on our behalf. One thing that I really want to get in, we've got a massive resource in Moray of young people with enthusiasm and passion and energy. And it was very good to see Caroline stand up and talk. How do we harness that? How do we empower that? Is our clarion call is get young people to engage and help us find a way. And interesting, we talk about hubs and mini hubs and ways of coordinating all this effort. I found out today in this meeting that Moray Council have a climate change working group. Yeah, been nice to see them stand up and pay attention as well. of the good work that's going out there. And when we're talking about sort of collaborating resource and pooling resource, that should be somewhere that we can just go to and go, where are we? But we'll see where it goes.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chris, for that contribution. Over to Jackie.
Hi, yeah, I'll just very briefly, our group, there was a good conversation about mixed themes and that within the group, and a real desire to take action and move things forward. So an example described was the Highland Good Food Conference, which came together and they had afternoon sessions and breakout rooms and ultimately ended up with projects and working groups. And so the thought was to maybe take some key themes and have sort of working groups moving forward to actually see action taking place. So maybe waste, biodiversity, food, just whatever themes come up. And so that was the real feel from the group. And certainly some of the things that have been said already about asset mapping and making sure that we can involve the MOD and the big whisky organisations and all the big employers in the local area. So that's a quick summary.
Thank you, Jackie. And over to Luke, and that's our final person.
Hi everybody. Yeah, so actually by this point most of our points have been covered. I think I'd just really like to echo that last point really about the data mapping, which we've discussed, and we also thought that would be really useful. So that's obviously an emergent theme again and again. But yeah, again, echoing the last point about action groups and about translating this forum into actual, action and groups. We're potentially thinking to simplify the arguments, simplify the areas of need a little bit. And because there's so many different areas when it comes to climate change, it would be nice to almost have like something simple, like 3 or 4 broad areas that we could break off into action groups where we feel that will add most value to that group. And then we can begin looking within those groups as to how we can make our contributions as organizations or as individuals. It's probably also mentioned that it was mentioned that China was the elephant in the room a little bit over the last conversation. It wasn't really mentioned that China was a huge producer, and part of our discussion was just about marrying our local action to the broader global actions that are needed and making sure we keep that dual perspective. Fuel poverty was also an issue that was raised with lots of progress being made in Berghead at the moment. And one point which I thought was quite good was related to COVID. Yeah, what actions have we taken to sort of mitigate COVID that have had a beneficial effect on climate change, and which of those actions are we going to kind of hard bake into our lives moving forward in that post-COVID world? So I think that's it.
Thank you, Luke. Roll on that post-COVID world. So I just want to acknowledge that we are over time, so thank you very much for those of you who have managed to stay with us. I want to just make a few announcements. tsiMORAY has an annual conference. It's Join the Dots, Shifting Perspectives. We've got an absolutely brilliant speaker, Cormac Russell, going to join us, who talks all about putting people in communities in the driving seat of their service delivery. It's very linked to everything we've been talking about today. That's on 24th of March. And if you sign up to our newsletter on our website, you'll see more information about how to sign up for that. So that's our annual conference on 24th of March. So please do save the date. As I say, you can sign up to our mailing list for all sorts of information, including funding, information about upcoming events, and also we're going to be putting regular information that's coming out from this climate assembly into our newsletter. So please do go onto our website and sign up to our newsletter. We've set up a Slack workspace to facilitate conversations continuing after this event. We'll send you a link on how to access that after this meeting. We're also going to be sending out a very short survey about what worked for the meeting, perhaps what didn't work, and harness your ideas. So we'd love to get any feedback that you're willing to share with us in that way. I'm sure many of you have taken notes during this meeting. So if you would like to share those with us, then please do forward them to our email address that is in our, I've just put it into the chat, but perhaps one of my colleagues can repeat it in the chat function. Email those through to us, and we'll make sure we find a way for collating and distributing the notes. We've also set up a hashtag for Twitter, so please do use that to stay in touch as well. It's hashtag Moray Climate Assembly. The next assembly date we've set is for the 2nd of March. So that's again 10 till 12, the 2nd of March for the next climate assembly. We want to really keep momentum going with this leading up to COP26. And also I want to just recognize that the actual action will be happening outside of these meetings. But the meetings, the assembly can function as a space for reconnecting, inspiring each other, and keeping the momentum going up to COP26. So the next meeting is on Tuesday, I think it's a Tuesday, the 2nd of March, 10 till 12, and you'll receive more information about that through our newsletter. Please do just get in touch with us in the variety of ways that you can do so these days. If you've got any ideas, feedback for how this assembly can be taken forward. I think as Martin has said, and it's been a repeating theme on this call, this has got to be about action. This isn't about talking to each other. It's about connecting and then translating that into direct action to tackle climate change leading up to COP26 and beyond in Moray. And let's just really make Moray a shining light. That's everything from me. It just leaves me to really give a heartfelt thanks to Martin Valenti, who gave up his valuable time and the various other meetings he could have been talking at to speak with us. Of course, Alec Walker as well, thank you so much for joining us and informing us and updating us on what's happening with Energising Moray. I'd like to thank my colleague Lucy Morrison, who has been working with me closely to dream this all up together. So thank you, Lucy. And of course, I have the whole tsiMORAY team to thank as well for their support, but I won't list all of their names. Thank you so much for joining. I look forward to seeing you on the 2nd of March.